From Dallas, Texas, this is Spool, hosted by Dr. Nils Roemer, Dean of the Bass School at UT Dallas.
I'm really thrilled about today's show. I think it's going to be both inspiring and emotional for many of us. Susan G. Komen is more than a name. Since 1982, it's been a symbol of strength, hope, and the global fight against breast cancer. I'm honored to introduce Natasha Mmeje, Director of Community Health Outreach for Susan G. Komen. Inspired by her mother's breast cancer journey, she's dedicated her career to closing gaps in breast health and ensuring that everyone has access to care and hope. Hi, Natasha.
Hello.
Thank you for joining me today.
Absolutely.
Have a seat.
Thank you.
We're all excited to learn about you and the important work that you're doing with Susan G. Komen. Just a couple of weeks ago, you hosted actually a race for the cure here on campus.
Yes.
Which is in many ways and in the minds of many really the core of some of the outreach activities of the foundation, with which it began some 40 years ago. What is the same and what is different today?
Sure, and thank you for having me. I would say, so we were founded 43 years ago. At that time, people weren't aware of breast cancer. I know now we see pink ribbons all over the place, and we know that that indicates, there you go, we know that that indicates breast cancer awareness or in memory of someone who might have lost their life to breast cancer. But in the 80s, no one talked about it. They couldn't really even utter the word breasts out loud. And so to have a conversation and to start a movement was something that was almost unheard of. And so Susan G. Komen Foundation really took the reins of that and really made this a movement for people to be able to talk about breast cancer, but then also to be able to lead the fight in research and working toward finding cures. And I think we're still doing that today. I think a lot of the work that we do is based and steeped in research, but it's also about community. And so to answer your question around the race for the cure, I think that that's one way that we're able to live out what that looks like. It's a very visible expression of it, but in those races, when people are fundraising, we talk about where their fundraising dollars go to, and that is both research and community.
So it is the same mission. It is the same need of outreach and education.
Yeah.
It's still the need to advance research. And on top of it is really also to kind of build communities, of survivors, of families that have gone through this. What has changed then in your mind over there? You said that the awareness has changed.
Yes.
How much of our scientific, methods have changed in terms of diagnosing, treating?
Absolutely. I think there have been a lot of advancements through the years, and I've been with Komen, with Susan G. Komen, for about 7 years now, and even in my short time with Komen, I've seen advancements. And we do see that. We do see that there are many more people living alive today with stage 4 or metastatic breast cancer. And that means if they're living longer, that means that there are therapies that are helping them to live longer. So
what are the challenges then that you face? In lots of ways it's an ongoing mission. It's not any longer the small grassroots organization. What was it, with the shoebox of 200 names or something or thereabout? That's how the story goes. It's obviously also something, breast cancer awareness is not just any longer Dallas, it's not the US, it's a global educational mission that you are pursuing. So what are the challenges that you're facing nowadays in this mission?
Yeah, I think that there are lots of challenges still. I mean, quite honestly, we haven't found cures, and that's what we're looking for. One of the things that we know now around the research is we used to be looking for a cure to one type of breast cancer, but through research and advancements, we know there are lots of other types of breast cancers. So there's a whole plethora of breast cancers, and continuing to find treatments and cures for those things are really important.
Someone could have been cured at the time, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they're cured for life, and so that complicates this as well. And, I mentioned earlier, I was really excited also to talk to you because my mom, like, many other women, had breast cancer, and there was some over 20 years ago. It was for us really an emotional period because it was just before my first son was born. And so it was like in this, and it's like for her it was scary, for my father it was scary, for all of us it was scary. But she's now 88 years old.
Amazing.
you know, has been around. My kids are now going to college, the very one that could barely stand up at the time. So in lots of ways, you know, was she cured forever? Possibly, yeah, but more importantly, she's been able to live out a long, long, happy life of retirement and grandchildren and all of the above. And so I think that's, you know, also what sometimes, you know, in her case, early detection, I think that's another kind of aspect, and that is, you know, in lots of ways dictating the potentialities of success or not, right?
Yeah, so I think questions around screening. So screening is really important in detection, in early detection. You mentioned that, how important that is. When we detect breast cancers early, there's a huge percentage of folks who will not pass away from this disease. And people still look at breast cancer sometimes as a death sentence, but we know it couldn't be further from the truth, especially with early detection.
In terms of the diagnostic methods, are there new methods? I mean, there's been issues around density, right?
Yes.
The ability of detecting, you know, cancer in denser breasts, for example.
Yeah.
You know, for traditional methods of mammograms, I believe, have been far more challenging. So are there better alternatives to this now, and also to making the process slightly less painful?
The typical way to screen for breast cancer, for a person who's of average risk, mammograms would start around age 40 every year. And then there used to be 2D mammograms, which look more like an X-ray.
Right.
And in more recent years, we've come up with 3D
That's what I heard. And
yes.
you know, in lots of ways that allows actually a far better view, right?
It does, especially for people with dense breasts. And to help people educate folks on that, what dense breast means are the way that we look at through the breast is like an X-ray. And so you see black spaces where you see through the breast, but a person with dense breasts, it shows up white. So imagine a cup of water that's just clear, and then imagine another cup of water with ice cubes in it. A cup with ice cubes is what makes it harder to see and detect breast cancers. And so dense breasts, it does increase risk for breast cancer, just because part of it is that it's harder to find. But the 3D mammogram does help with that. But in some cases, people may need additional diagnostic to make sure that there is no breast cancer in their breast. So that might include things like ultrasound or MRIs. So sometimes that's normal for people to get those every time they get a mammography screening. They also have to follow up with MRI or ultrasound.
In lots of ways, what you're doing now is still very much being an educator. From your perspective, is educating, I mean, in your case, it's the public, right? There's no limit, so to speak, on your mission. Has that become more challenging in this day and age?
I think it's different. I think it's important for people to sort of drown out the noise. There's a lot of misinformation because when people think about, breast cancer, if they have maybe a breast cancer scare or they're waiting for a diagnosis, the first thing a lot of people do is they will do a search engine. They will Google it and they look it up. And that's one of the things we say, it's probably not the best idea.
Not the good idea.
And so one of the things that Susan G. Komen is really standing by is really trying to make sure that all the information on our website is reputable. And so we want it to be a safe haven for people to go and find good, reputable educational information around breast cancer.
So give us, just maybe just the kind of the short version of this. Just the bare numbers, breast cancer. Who's impacted by it? Just the numbers. How big is it?
Sure. Well, it's big. Most people will have known someone or them-themselves have been diagnosed, or a family member or a friend or a colleague. We know that 1 in 8 women will be diagnosed with breast cancer in their lifetime.
Those are the numbers for the United States or globally?
In the U.S.
In the U.S.
Yeah, so it's a larger population.
It's a huge number, yes. So, like you said, it's invariably that it's the mother, the grandmother, the sister, or some friend or so that any one of us would know.
Yes.
So that just means that it really matters in many ways.
Absolutely.
Equally, and I think that's important, I used the example of my mother, so that's some 20 years ago, and I think we earlier talked about how treatment has also undergone some significant changes, that there can be a far better adjusted methods these days than they used to. Could you speak a little bit to that, that there are many more choices available nowadays?
Yeah, I think back then when your mom was in treatment, it might have been more of a one-size-fits-all kind of model. So people come in, they get diagnosed, they get chemotherapy, or they have surgery and then chemotherapy and radiation. But today, it is really much more tailored to who that person is, what kind of barriers they may face, can they get in for treatment all the time, and then a lot about their type of tumor, what stage of their diagnosis it is. And so it is no longer a one-size-fits-all model. It is much more tailored to that particular person's breast cancer and the best options for them.
No, that's in lots of ways a source of a tremendous amount of hope, because the other part that obviously I remember, and I think I'll be not the only one, that not only was my mom scared, but so was my father, my sister very much, myself. And so breast cancer is obviously, for the individual who's affected by it, tremendously challenging and a source of great fear, but as well for everyone around, for families. Sure. And I think also for families often in a very lasting manner, because there's never this entire certainty as to whether the cure was totally complete, or how this may or may not also predict things that are going to occur in the lives of loved ones, my sister being in this case one of them. Can you speak a little bit, what role does a foundation like yours, in lots of ways you have your hands full, an educational global mission, the fight against cancer, but there's also a tremendous role to play in educating, but also in dealing with the fear, the grief, or the mourning of these individuals and their extended families. So how do you relate to this? I mean, you experienced some of this yourself, right?
Absolutely. So my mom is an 11-year survivor, and I completely understand what you were saying. At the time when my mom was diagnosed, we were living in two different states, and so I could not physically help her, and that's actually what drew me to Komen, were their resources and support. And so I think when a person is diagnosed, like you said, it is not just that one person's diagnosis, it affects the entire family. One of the things that we have to offer by way of support is our patient care center. And so our patient care center is answered by, it's a live line, or you can do email, but it's answered by patient navigators who are there to support folks and hold their hand throughout the entire process. And that's not just the people that are diagnosed, but also for families and caregivers, because caregivers may have questions about, hey, how do I support this person? What should I say? What shouldn't I say? That's kind of hard to know, because for a lot of times, a lot of people, that one person that you love is the first one in your family. No, and
it's challenging. I mean, now that you mentioned it, I do remember, like you said, at the time, my mother lived in Germany, I lived in England, so not exactly around the corner. My sister lived somewhere else. While my mom was cured and all that, it took a while really to get her back on the feet in terms of her vitality and energy and all of that. And so therefore, a lot of it depended on the curing, so to speak, of my father, and helping him along as well, particularly since we were not exactly close by.
It takes a lot. And for people who may not understand what it means for a person in treatment, it might mean that they have surgery, so they have to recover from that surgery. It may mean chemotherapy, which can be challenging for folks to show up every day. So car rides to show up for treatment, and even for radiation. Sometimes people have to go every single day for a few weeks to go to treatment, and that is taxing.
These days, everything is about information and misinformation, right? And so are there any obvious things that come to your mind where you think the public is really misinformed about some aspect or another of breast cancer or its cure, that you constantly face over and over again as you're trying to really bring breast cancer awareness to wider global audiences? Sometimes
people feel that, hey, we've talked about this a lot. Aren't there cures already? I've heard that there are advancements in treatments. How are there not cures? And I think that couldn't be further from the truth. I think a lot of times we do talk about breast cancer awareness, but it's also important for us to talk about education and then into action. So how do we do something about it? Not just increasing our awareness, but how do we do something about it?
It's a global fight. So how does that translate into global audiences? Does the program of the foundation translates equally into entirely different audiences globally?
Like you said, we started here in Dallas, and we are now worldwide. But I also think it's more about the movement that was created through Komen, where you see lots of different organizations at the helm now, which is a beautiful thing, but they are all dedicated to the same things, trying to find cures, trying to educate people about what breast cancer is and how early detection really saves lives. And I feel like we're really proud of that. We're proud of the movement that we've started here.
Thinking globally, but also again thinking locally about barriers. I mean, you know, you're talking about education, awareness, barriers, social or otherwise, also an important aspect of what you're facing as challenges.
Absolutely. There are lots of barriers. I know language is one of those things, and so we work to make sure that our educational materials are available in multiple languages, because that in and of itself can just be a barrier and where people don't get the access to the educational tools that they need. But beyond that, I think people have lots of different barriers when they're trying to access care, and we have to be able to be nimble enough to kind of speak to that. And so sometimes it is cost, sometimes it is lack of insurance, or maybe they have insurance but they're underinsured, so it's not enough to cover either their treatment or even their diagnosis. And so for us, trying to help them and removing some of those barriers is what's really important. And I do think that that's what our patient care center really does. They do that work every single day to support people wherever they are, to help find support systems, find financial, resources wherever they are.
You have 2 daughters, right?
Yes, I do.
So, I mean, you're an educator, your husband is an educator, he works at SMU. How relevant or not, I mean, your daughters are teenagers, I believe, right?
Right.
So how important is this, what you're doing in terms of what you want them to inherit from this? Because there's, more to this. I mean, there's advocacy, there's agency, there's, believing in something, there's hope. I mean, there are a lot of other kind of qualities that come to bear in order to do what you're doing, right?
Yes,
so
absolutely.
How is this how does it play itself out, if you don't mind, around the table at home, so to speak, with your 2 daughters?
It's a good question. So when my mom was diagnosed, my daughters were pretty small. So they were younger. They didn't see her go through her struggles with breast cancer in the same ways. But given the work I do, you talk about around the dinner table, we talk about this all the time.
All right.
And so I know with knowledge is power, and I want my daughters to feel empowered to take charge of their own health and their own breast health, and understand what it means to kind of move forward and be a healthy person for themselves. I also think I want them to live in a world where they don't have to worry about breast cancer. And so that's what keeps me going every day, is to know that what I'm doing is making a difference, and that we will eventually get to a place where you put me out of a job. I want to be put out of a job, right? So that we live in a space where my children and maybe my grandchildren down the line don't even have to worry about being a statistic around breast cancer.
But we talked about awareness, and we talked about educational campaign. But there's also such an emotional core to all of this. And so what I want to know is a little bit more like, how do you address that for a woman, thinking about breast cancer awareness? There's at some point the choice to go and to have a mammogram or not.
Sometimes women do talk about being afraid to go in for mammograms. Sometimes they say it hurts so much.
It's uncomfortable, right?
It is not a walk in the park.
No.
It is not. But so that was one fear. Some of the other fears are, hey, maybe either I felt something in my breast and there might be something and I don't want to know the answer. So if I'm diagnosed, I don't want to hear that. It feels scary to me and I don't want to know the answer, but I can't say it enough. Having breast cancer is not a death sentence, especially with early detection. And so, yes, it takes about 15 minutes. It's not like, you know, eating your favorite food, but it is a necessary thing. And the way that we talk about early detection is through mammogram.
And it's really important then for that message to say it's not an either or.
It's
right?
not an either or.
So that's maybe, you know, the simplicity that, you know, stuck in one's mind, you know, in my memory of sorts, right?
Yeah.
That in lots of ways, what you're really trying to tell everyone, it's getting there, is giving you, whatever the outcome is, multiple, you know, choices and outcomes, right?
Right, and we talk a lot about mammograms, and that's really around age 40 for people of average risk, but there are things that people can do before that. So at age 25, a lot of people don't know, we should, as women, should be getting clinical breast exams. So that's an exam that your doctor is doing with you in the doctor's office. And so there are things we need to be thinking about our breast health long before age 40, long before mammograms come into play. So that's another message I share. And
with your daughters, probably. I was about to say, this is where education begins quite literally then in your household. Really
Absolutely.
interesting. You know, related probably also to this, you know, educational core of you, don't want to fail to mention how much the Komen Foundation is also advancing research agenda that is, you know, that's ultimately what drives, I believe, most of the fundraising initiatives, right?
Absolutely. So research is super important, and I know Susan G. Komen has invested nearly $1.1 billion into research and grants for researchers. Some of that is around clinical trials. And I also know that Susan G. Komen has played a part in 29 out of 30 of the most recent advancements in breast cancer, which is a huge thing. We're actually really proud of that, because we know once we research, especially those aggressive types of breast cancer and stage 4 or metastatic breast cancer, once we help those folks live longer, we know that everyone else will as well.
So there's awareness, there's fear, there's education, genders, and then there's research. Let me now return to you as our time is coming to an end. You know, my notes have here that you completed a BA degree in Sociology and Black Studies at UC Santa Barbara, and then later pursued a master's degree in Health Promotion and Education at the University of Southern California. So you truly have always been an educator, but the decision really to do what you ended up now doing already for 7 years is a very personal one. You had a very successful career, but in a way, I suspect you dropped all of this almost on a dime when you learned that your mom had breast cancer.
Yeah, you know, when my mom was diagnosed, I didn't know what to do. I was far away. We talked about that, being far away from her, not having the support for myself or for her where she lived, and trying to find ways to kind of connect with what was most important, which is getting her the help she needed, and then for me. Susan G. Komen was that for me. And when I left my job in higher education, I really wanted to work at a place where my heart connected with the mission. And that was through Susan G. Komen. I moved here to Dallas, and Susan G. Komen is headquartered here, and so
that's right. Here's where everything began.
Here's where it all began.
And I think we're all the luckier that you were born in LA, worked in Chicago, but that home is now Dallas.
It is, yes.
So thank you again for joining me here today, Natasha.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.